Welcome to the wonderful world of vocabulary. Starring your hosts, the Sage Team, with Ms. Synonym and Mr. Antonym, along with general knowledge, and lastly, Ms. Example. Ms. Synonym is a sassy lady who never lets an unfamiliar word get the best of her. When she sees a new word in a sentence, she searches high and low for a familiar word that means the same thing. Mr. Antonym is a contrary man who contradicts everyone and everything. Every day is an opposite day for him. When an unfamiliar word or phrase baffles him, he is on the lookout for a known word or phrase that seems to be the opposite of the new word. While it takes him a little longer than Ms. Synonym, this technique serves him well and increases his understanding. General Knowledge is an ex-military officer turned businessman. He uses the observational skills that he develops on the battlefield to define any new word that he comes across. By finding clues throughout the sentence and passage and comparing these to his experience, he avoids wasting time in the dictionary without losing the meaning of the reading. Ms. Example knows that one of the best ways to learn something new is to find a great example. She likes examples so much that she even learned how to style her hair by watching Ms. Synonym. Whenever she finds a new word in her reading, she automatically looks for familiar examples that help her understand that word. Watch your work. Synonyms. The dromedary, commonly called a camel, stores fat in its hump. Oh no, what does the word in red mean?
I've never seen the word dromedary in my life, but I think I can help. It says that most people call a dromedary a camel. Perhaps dromedary is a fancy word for camel. Do you think that might be what it is? We can test our guess by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. Looks great to me. If you're still uncertain, you can look it up. What do you know? We were right. Good work.
Let's try another. At first, the surgery seems to be successful, but several hours later, the patient's condition began to deteriorate, and it continued to worsen over the next few days. Another big word. What does the word in red mean?
Deteriorate is a pretty big word as well. Let's look to see if the sentence contains a familiar synonym, a word that means the same thing. Remember that we can test our idea, but the word "it" in the second part of the sentence refers to the patient's condition. If it worsened, we can assume that deteriorates has a similar meaning. Remember that we can test our idea by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. The first sentence lets us know that the surgery did not lead to a successful outcome, and worsens seems to make sense when we substitute it for deteriorates. If you're still uncertain, remember to double check. Right again. You're so ready for Mr. Antonym.
Watch him work. Antonyms. Unlike his quiet and low-key family, Brad is garrulous. Another crazy word. What does the word in red mean?
This one is going to require a little more sleuthing. We need to find words in the sentence that are opposite of garrulous. Unlike is a great signal word. It indicates one or more antonyms are nearby. In this case, quiet and low-key seem to be the opposite of garrulous. Using antonyms to define new words requires one more step than using synonyms. Once we determine that garrulous is the opposite of quiet and low-key, we have to find a word that would express that. How about noisy, loud, or talkative? Test your idea by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. I think we're right because if Brad is unlike his family, who are quiet and low-key, it makes total sense that he is loud, noisy, and talkative. Remember to double-check if you are still uncertain. Ms. Synonym was right. You were good at this.
Let's try another. I expected truthfulness from a doctor. I was shocked by his mendacity. This might be your toughest yet. What does the word in red mean?
To be honest, I don't think I have ever seen or heard mendacity used, but I bet there are clues to help us. So we know that we expected the doctor to tell the truth, but instead, he displayed mendacity. What is the opposite of truthfulness? Maybe lying or dishonesty? Test our idea by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. This sentence really seems to make sense. I bet that dishonesty is very similar to mendacity. If you're still uncertain, remember to double check. Excellent. We're on a roll. You're now ready for general knowledge.
Watch him work. General knowledge. The decision Veronica made to study instead of going out for pizza with her friends was prudent. She got an A on the exam while her friends all got D's. This is a toughie. What does the word in red mean?
Prudent is not a word that you hear a lot, but I bet if we combine the clues in the sentence with our prior experience, that we can figure this one out. So Veronica did the opposite of her friends and got a good grade, while her friends made bad choices and got bad grades. Being prudent seems to mean making smart and wise choices. We can test our guess by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. In my experience, smart decisions lead to good results, both on the battlefield and in the boardroom. I suspect that prudent has a similar idea to smart and wise. Let's double check. We were correct. You're really getting the hang of this.
Let's try another. Their vociferous chatter made me wish I had earplugs. My, that's a big one. What does the word in red mean?
Vociferous is enormous, but we can break it down piece by piece. Think of situations where you needed or wished that you had earplugs. For me, concerts, fireworks, or the firing range all come to mind. What do they have in common? They are all incredibly loud and noisy. We can assume that the writer also thinks their talking is quite loud. Let's try that. Remember that we can test our idea by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. This makes sense to me, but let's double check. Right again. Time to move on to Miss Example.
Watch your work. Examples. Joan loves to buy exotic foods. Vegetables and herbs from China, spices from India, olives from Greece, and cheeses from France. Another one to decipher. What does the word in red mean?
Now that you know how to use synonyms, antonyms, and general knowledge to define unfamiliar words, it is time to look for examples. The writer gives us 4 examples of food that are exotic: Chinese herbs, Indian spices, Greek olives, and French cheeses. What do they all have in common? They are all from another place. What are some words we can use to describe that? Maybe foreign or from afar. We can test our guess by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. This seems entirely logical to me. Great guess. If you're still uncertain, remember to double check. Smart choice. We were right. Keep it up.
Last one. When going to an office party, you should show your best decorum. For example, dress your best, drink and eat moderately, and be sure to thank the host before you leave. What does the word in red mean?
The writer gives us 3 examples of the best decorum. What are they? Dressing well, eating and drinking moderately, and thanking the host. What do these all have in common? They were all examples of good behavior and manners. Remember that we can test our idea by replacing the word in red with our guess to see if it makes sense. This makes perfect sense to me. Double check if you are still uncertain. Right again! You're ready to take on any new word.
The end.